The key didn't turn. Frank Henderson stood on his own front porch that December morning, breath clouding in the cold, and tried the lock again. Nothing. The taxi idled at the curb behind him, exhaust rising white against the gray sky. Snow squeaked under his boots, that particular sound it makes when the temperature drops below 25. He'd been gone 10 years, worked overseas, sent money home every month, saved for retirement, for Linda, for them. The key should have worked. Through the living room window, he saw why it didn't. A younger man sat on Frank's couch, wearing Frank's old terry cloth robe, drinking from Frank's Navy mug, the one with the anchor that his father had given him. The TV flickered blue in the morning dimness. The man turned his head, and Frank's stomach dropped. Travis, his nephew. And behind him, in the hallway, Linda appeared. No smile, no rush to the door, just cold recognition. Frank rang the doorbell. The chime echoed inside, the same Westminster melody they'd installed in 1987. He could hear footsteps, heavy ones. The door opened. Travis stood there in the threshold, and for a second, maybe less, his face went blank, caught. Then it rearranged itself into something like surprise, like concern, like he had any right to either emotion. Uncle Frank. Travis didn't move from the doorway. We weren't expecting you. My key doesn't work. Yeah, Linda had the locks changed. Security thing. Frank looked past his nephew's shoulder. His coat rack, the one his father had built from barnwood, was gone. In its place hung Travis's leather jacket, a gym bag, car keys on a hook. The living room beyond looked the same, but wrong, like a stage set of his life with the wrong actor. Can I come in? Frank's voice was steady. He'd learned that in the Navy. Keep your voice level and your hands won't shake. Linda appeared behind Travis. She'd cut her hair short, dyed it blonde, wore makeup Frank didn't recognize. She crossed her arms. Frank, not honey, not, oh my God, you're home. Just his name, flat as yesterday's coffee. Linda, and we need to talk, she said. That's what I'm trying to do. Can I come inside? Let's handle this out here. Handle this. Like he was a situation. A problem to be managed. Travis shifted his weight, and Frank saw the Navy mug in his hand. His father's mug. The one Frank had drunk coffee from every morning for 40 years until he'd left it here, safe, for when he came home. How long? Frank asked. Travis looked at Linda. Linda looked at Frank. How long have you been living in my house? Frank's voice was still level, but his hands had started to shake. He shoved them in his coat pockets. Few months, Travis said. 18 months, Linda corrected. She said it like she was reading a grocery list. Travis has been staying here, helping out. The cold air bit at Frank's face. Somewhere down the street, a snowplow scraped asphalt. The sound carried in the stillness. I sent money every month, Frank said. I called when I could get through. I wrote letters. We know, but Linda's arms stayed crossed. Then why? It's complicated, Frank. Nothing about it seemed complicated to him. He'd worked 10 years in 110-degree heat, 14-hour days, so she could retire comfortable, so they could travel, maybe. See the grandkids they'd never had. Live quiet. Travis took a sip from the mug. Frank watched his nephew's throat work as he swallowed, watched him drink Frank's coffee from Frank's mug in Frank's doorway. The mail, Frank said. I had bills forwarded here. We had it changed to Travis's name, Linda said. It was easier. Easier. He's been taking care of things. Frank looked at the mailbox at the street. He'd walked right past it getting out of the taxi, focused on the house, on being home. Now he saw it clearly. The name painted on the side in neat black letters. T. Henderson. Not forwarded. Replaced. I think we should talk about this tomorrow, Frank said. He needed time, needed to think, when I'm not so tired. There's nothing to talk about properly, Linda said. This is the situation, Frank. We'll figure out the details, but this is how things are. How things are. Present tense. Permanent. Travis and Linda exchanged a look. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but Frank saw it. The kind of look people share when they've made plans, when they're on the same side of something. A porch light flicked on next door, Doris Patterson's house. The elderly widow, who'd lived there since before Frank and Linda moved in. He saw her curtain move. I should go, Frank said. Linda nodded. Travis said nothing. Frank walked back to the taxi. His boots squeaked in the snow with each step. Behind him, he heard his front door close. Not slam, just close, firm and final. Where to? The driver asked. Frank sat in the back seat, staring at the mailbox. T. Henderson, like F. Henderson had never existed. Like 40 years in that house had been erased with a can of paint. Motel, he said. Anything on Route 34. The Motel 6 smelled like industrial cleaner and the ghosts of 1,000 cigarettes. Frank paid cash for 3 nights. Didn't know if he'd need more or less. Didn't know much of anything right then. The room was what you'd expect. 2 double beds with matching floral bedspreads that had seen better decades. A TV bolted to the dresser. A radiator that hissed and clanked like it was angry about something. The carpet had a pattern designed to hide stains. Frank set his duffel on the bed, sat down beside it. The mattress springs groaned. His phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Frank, this is Doris Patterson, your neighbor. Doris, hi. I saw you at the house. Her voice was careful. I've been wanting to call you. For a while now. I don't have your number. I know. I didn't have yours either, overseas, but, Frank, I've been watching your house. She paused. I think you better come by tomorrow morning, early. There's things you need to see. What things? Come by around 8. We'll talk then. She hung up before he could ask more. Frank looked at the velvet box on the nightstand. He'd bought it 6 months ago. Linda's anniversary present. Diamonds. Real ones. Cost him 2 months' salary. He opened the box. The necklace caught of the cheap lamplight. Sparkled like it had something to celebrate. He snapped the box shut. That small click was the loudest sound in the room. Outside, trucks rumbled past on Route 34. The radiator hissed. And somewhere in that blue house on Maple Street, his nephew was drinking coffee from his father's mug. How long, Frank wondered, was I the only one who thought we had a marriage? Frank didn't sleep. At 2 a.m. he made instant coffee in the room's little pot. At 4 a.m. he watched infomercials with the sound off. At 6 a.m. he showered and put on the same clothes he'd worn on the plane. By 7:30, he was standing outside First County Bank, waiting for them to open. Gerald Morrison had been the branch manager for 30 years. He'd approved Frank and Linda's first mortgage back in '82. Had come to Frank's father's funeral. Good man. Honest man. When Gerald saw Frank walk through the door, his face did something complicated. Frank, I heard you were back. He didn't sound happy about it. They went to his office. Wood paneling, family photos, a clock that ticked too loud. Gerald pulled up the account on his computer, and Frank watched his face tighten. I need to see the account status, Frank said. Gerald turned the monitor. Frank leaned forward. The joint account showed $247.18. Frank had deposited over $180,000 in the past 10 years. Monthly wire transfers like clockwork, every single one. There's more. Gerald clicked to another screen. The house was refinanced 8 months ago, equity withdrawal of $145,000. The room felt smaller, the clock louder. I didn't authorize that. There's a power of attorney on file. Linda's signature. Notarized. Gerald printed it out, slid it across the desk. It says you were absent and unreachable, unable to participate in financial decisions. Frank stared at the document. The words blurred together. Absent, unreachable, unable. I sent money every month, he said. I called when I could get through. I wasn't unreachable. I know, Frank, but legally the POA is valid. My hands are tied. Frank looked at the transaction history. Hotels, restaurants, electronics stores, cash withdrawals. One charge caught his eye. $4,800 to something called Henderson Business Ventures, LLC. What's this? Gerald cleared his throat. Travis's company? Some kind of tech startup? It folded after 6 months. Frank's retirement, Linda's security, their future. All of it drained away for a business that lasted half a year. Can I contest this? You'd need a lawyer. Gerald's voice was gentle, sad even. Frank, I'm sorry. I didn't like any of this. But the paperwork was legal. Frank folded the printout and put it in his pocket, stood up, shook Gerald's hand because that's what you do, even when your whole life's been stolen. Outside, the December cold felt good, sharp and clean, real. The Main Street diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee. The good kind of burnt, the kind that means the pot's been on since 5 a.m. Frank took a booth in the back, needed to think, needed to figure out his next move. Wanda, the morning waitress, brought him coffee without asking. Black, no sugar. She'd worked there 20 years, knew everybody's order. Heard you were back, she said. Word travels. Small town. She refilled a mug that wasn't even half empty yet, just being kind. You doing okay? Before Frank could answer, the bell over the door chimed. Travis walked in. He spotted Frank immediately, hesitated, then walked over like they were old friends meeting for breakfast. Uncle Frank. He slid into the booth without being invited. Good to see you. Up close in daylight, Travis looked expensive. Haircut that probably cost $50, designer jacket, and on his wrist a Rolex. Frank knew watches. That was $8,000, maybe $10,000. We should talk, Travis said. I'm listening. Travis ordered without looking at the menu. Ribeye, medium rare. Loaded baked potato, beer with breakfast. The kind of meal that costs $30. When you're counting. Frank sipped his coffee, waited. Look, Travis started. I know this is weird, but Linda was falling apart. She was alone. I'm family. I stepped up. For 18 months. She needed help. With what? Travis shifted. His tell, he'd always been easy to read. Just life stuff. The house, bills, you know. I paid the bills. Every month. Well, yeah, but emotionally, she was lonely. Wanda came back, refilled Frank's coffee, gave Travis a look that could strip paint. She knew. Everyone in town would know by now. The refinance, Frank said. That was helping? Travis touched his watch, adjusted it. Another tell. Linda handled the finances. I don't know all the details. Your business, Henderson Business Ventures. That got $4,800. That was, Travis stopped, regrouped. Look, I tried to make something work. It didn't pan out. These things happen. Through the window, Frank saw Travis's truck in the parking lot. Brand new Silverado. $50,000 easy. Black paint so shiny you could see clouds in it. Nice truck, Frank said. Thanks, just got it. What do you do for work these days, Travis? The younger man looked away. I'm between opportunities right now. Between opportunities. At 38 years old. Living in someone else's house? Spending someone else's money? Wearing someone else's father's robe? Travis's food arrived. He cut into the steak like he'd earned it. Maybe it'd be easier, Travis said, chewing, if you just moved on. Started fresh somewhere else. Less complicated for everyone. Frank's hands tightened around his mug. The ceramic was warm, solid, real. Easier. I'm just saying, Linda and I, we've got a thing going. It's been a while, and you've been gone so long, maybe it's just time. A thing going, not helping, not caretaking, a thing. Travis left a $40 bill on the table for a $28 meal, showing off. Walked out to his $50,000 truck, bought with Frank's retirement money. Wanda came back after he left, leaned in close. Honey, she said, voice low. I shouldn't say nothing, but Doris Patterson's been asking about you. Your neighbor? She's got something you need to see. Frank looked up. What kind of something? The kind you need to see. Wanda squeezed his shoulder. Don't wait. Outside, Travis's truck roared to life. All that horsepower, all that shine, all bought with 10 years of Frank's life. Frank had a storage unit on the edge of town. You store it, Unit 27. He'd rented it before going overseas, packed away things that wouldn't fit in the house, tools, photo albums, important documents. The combination lock still remembered his fingers. 14-32-8, his father's birthday. The door rolled up with a metallic screech that echoed across the empty facility. Inside, everything looked untouched, boxes labeled in his own handwriting, covered in dust. Tools and photos. Important documents. He opened the document box first. Manila folders, neatly organized. Birth certificates. The deed to the house, his father's will. His own Navy discharge papers, DD-214, honorable service, 1975-1979. At the bottom, a folder he didn't recognize. Newer, not his handwriting on the tab. Frank pulled it out, sat down on the concrete floor because his legs suddenly didn't want to hold him. The first paper was a domestic partnership application signed by Linda Henderson and Travis Henderson, dated June 15, 2024, 6 months ago, notarized, official, legal, while they were still married. Next came photographs, printed on regular paper, probably from a phone. Linda and Travis at Lake Tahoe, the mountains blue behind them, both smiling, Travis's arm around her waist. Another from Chicago, Millennium Park, that big silver bean sculpture everybody takes pictures with. Linda laughing, looking up at Travis like he'd hung the moon. Nashville, Santa Fe, San Diego. Frank recognized some of the charges from the bank statement. He'd funded these trips, every dinner, every hotel, every goddamned souvenir, working in 118-degree heat while they vacationed on his money. Credit card statements followed. Hotels, always double occupancy. Fine dining, spa treatments. A jewelry store charge for telling $200. Frank wondered what Travis had bought her, wondered if she wore it. Then he found the printed emails. The first one was from Linda to Travis, dated 2 years ago. The ghost I married too young. I deserve happiness. He's never here anyway. Even when he wasn't really present, just there, like furniture. Travis's response, you deserve someone who sees you. I see you. Frank's hands started shaking. He kept reading. When's the old man coming back? Travis had written 6 months ago. Linda's reply, hopefully never. But if he does, we'll handle it. The POA gives me control. He signed everything over before he left. He won't have a legal leg to stand on. The old man, that's what they called him. The ghost. The fool. Frank let the papers fall, put his head in his hands. The storage unit was cold, the cement seeping through his jeans, but he didn't move. Couldn't move. 10 years, 120 months, over 3,000 days of working, sending money home, writing letters, calling when the connection was good enough. All of it for someone who called him a ghost. He'd missed his father's last year because of the work schedule, missed the funeral, got home 3 days late, stood at the grave alone, no one left to stand with him. For what? For this? Frank found a wedding photo in one of the boxes. Black and white. Courthouse steps. 1982. Linda in a simple white dress, Frank in a borrowed suit, both of them smiling. Real smiles. Young smiles. He remembered that day. The rice people threw. His old Chevy Nova with "just married" soaped on the windows, carrying her over the threshold of their tiny apartment, both of them laughing because he'd banged her head on the doorframe. She'd said, "You better not drop me." He'd said, "Never." Another memory surfaced. Kitchen table, 2015. Bills spread out between them. Linda sighing, running numbers on a calculator. "I don't know how we're going to make it," she'd said. Frank had seen the ad that day. Maritime logistics, overseas contract, Saudi Arabia, triple his salary. $180,000 a year instead of $60,000. "I could do this," he'd said. 10 years, we'd be set for retirement. Really set, travel. Help out if we ever get grandkids. Linda had looked at the printout. That's a long time apart. But then we'd never have to worry again. She'd been quiet. Then, "If that's what you think is best?" Not yes, not no, just "if that's what you think." He'd taken it as agreement. His father had worked 70-hour weeks to provide for family. Frank's generation didn't talk about feelings. They showed love through sacrifice, through providing, through working until your hands bled so the people you loved didn't have to. But maybe Linda had wanted something else. Maybe she'd wanted him home, broke but present. Maybe she'd said, "if that's what you think," because she'd already started checking out of the marriage and didn't care either way. He'd never asked, never said, what do you want? Just assumed he knew. Frank closed the wedding photo album. That woman on the courthouse steps was gone. Had been gone for years, probably. He just hadn't known he was a widower. His phone buzzed. Text message. "Unknown number. This is Doris. Come by tonight. Back door. Don't let them see you." Frank looked at the evidence scattered around him. The photos, the emails, the domestic partnership papers, Linda's words, "the ghost I married." He gathered everything up, folded it carefully, put it in his coat pocket. They'd wanted him to disappear, to be a ghost they could ignore. But ghosts, Frank thought, standing up, brushing cement dust from his jeans, ghosts had a way of haunting the guilty. The storage unit door rolled down with the same metallic screech. The lock clicked shut. Frank drove back toward town as the winter sun set early, the way it does in December. The sky went from gray to darker gray to almost black. Streetlights flickered on. Christmas decorations glowed in windows. Somewhere in that blue house on Maple Street, Travis and Linda were probably having dinner. Sitting at the table Frank had refinished 5 years ago, using the dishes from Frank's mother, living the life they'd stolen, not for much longer. Morrison's hardware smelled the way it always had, sawdust and motor oil and bags of fertilizer stacked against the back wall. Frank had been shopping there for 30 years. Dale Morrison was his age, a fishing buddy back when Frank had time for such things. Dale was at the register when Frank walked in, saw him. Face went hard. Frank grabbed a padlock from aisle 7, heavy-duty master lock for the storage unit, brought it to the counter. "Hey, Dale." Dale rang it up without looking at him. $14.75. No good to see you, no heard you were back, no how was overseas. Just the price. "How's Marianne doing?" Frank tried. $14.75. The teenager bagging, some kid Frank didn't know, looked uncomfortable. Sensing the tension, the way young people do, not knowing what it meant but knowing it was bad, behind Frank, Betty Summers' stage whispered to her companion, "Nerve of him showing up after abandoning her for 10 years. Frank paid exact change. Dale bagged the lock and slid it across the counter without a word. As Frank turned to leave, he heard Dale mutter, just loud enough to be heard, "Some people got no shame." Frank stopped. His hand tightened on the bag. He could turn around, could explain, could defend himself. Instead, he walked out. The bell above the door chimed too cheerfully for the moment. In the truck, Frank watched through the window. Dale was already talking to another customer, smiling, animated. Same old Dale, just not for Frank anymore. How many others had chosen sides? How many had believed Linda's version without ever asking for his? Sunday morning, Frank debated it. Hadn't missed a Sunday service in 40 years, except when he was overseas. First Lutheran Church, third pew from the front, left side. His and Linda's spot he went anyway, wasn't going to hide. The church parking lot was full. Frank took his usual space, muscle memory, walked up the stone steps, same steps he'd walked 1,000 times. The door was heavy oak, original from 1904. The brass handle was worn smooth by a century of hands. Inside smelled like lemon pledge and old hymnals. The organ was already playing, Mrs. Chin doing her warm-up scales. Light came through the stained glass windows, throwing colored shadows across the pews. The ladies' Bible study group was in their usual spot, front left. Their conversation stopped when Frank entered, heads turned, then the whispers started again, louder than before. Intentional. Linda sat third row, left side. Her side now. She didn't turn when Frank walked down the aisle, studied ignorance. Travis wasn't there. Didn't have the guts to show his face in church. Frank sat in the back, way in the back, where he could see everyone and no one had to see him. Reverend Cole came out for the service. Saw Frank, did a visible double take. Something crossed his face. Guilt, maybe, or conflict. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it, walked to the pulpit. The sermon was about forgiveness. Turning the other cheek, Cole kept glancing at Frank, then away. The man knew something. Frank could see it in every nervous glance, every pause in the sermon. When they stood for Amazing Grace, Frank sang. His voice cracked on, I once was lost, but now am found. The woman next to him, a stranger, someone new to town, handed him a tissue without comment. Small kindness. He took it. After the service, Cole approached, got within 3 feet, opened his mouth, then shook his head and walked away. Whatever he wanted to say, he couldn't. Not yet. Betty Summers held court near the coffee station, voice loud enough to carry. The nerve of him showing up. After 10 years? After abandoning that poor woman? She had to do what she had to do. But then old Mr. Peterson walked over. 88 years old, Korean War vet, walked with a cane, but stood straight as a rifle barrel. He shook Frank's hand, firm grip. Glad you're home, son. Your country needed you then. Glad you served your time. From one veteran to another, the handshake said everything else. I see you. I know sacrifice. Wanda from the diner was there too. She pressed a Tupperware container into Frank's hands. Chicken casserole. Figured you're not cooking much these days. Frank almost broke. Almost lost it right there in the church foyer. Instead, he nodded. Thank you. 2 kindnesses. In a sea of judgment, 2 people who saw him as human. On the way out, Frank saw Linda on the church steps. She was surrounded by women from the book club, all of them clustered around her like protective hens. One of them looked at Frank, then back at Linda with pity. Pity for Linda, not for the man who'd worked a decade to provide for her. Linda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the abandoned wife, the victim, the woman who'd suffered alone while her husband chose money over her. She'd been building this narrative for years, all those phone calls to friends, all those Bible studies where she'd sighed about being alone, all those church dinners where people had probably asked, how's Frank? And she'd said something like, working, always working, never here. She'd had 10 years to tell her story, to make herself the martyr. Frank's truth was just arriving, late to a fight that had been fought and decided in his absence. At the post office Monday morning, Margie behind the counter asked if he needed mail forwarding forms. You leaving town, Frank? He'd considered it, thought about it all night. Florida, maybe? Colorado. Somewhere, no one knew his name or his shame. Thinking about it, he admitted. Margie leaned in, voice low. My ex did what yours is doing, took everything while I was working double shifts at the hospital. I ran, left town. She paused. Regretted it every day since. Felt like I let him win. She handed him the forms anyway. But you do what you need to survive. Frank took them, stared at the blank spaces. New address, new life, new start. He crumpled them up, threw them in the trash can by the door. Not yet, he said. Maybe not ever. Outside, the town square spread before him. Courthouse, church, diner, hardware store. His whole life, visible in 4 buildings. He could walk away, never look back. Or he could fight for every inch. His father's voice in his memory. Don't let them take what's yours. Frank stood there in the December cold, breath clouding, and made his choice. I stay. Tuesday night. 2:14 a.m. The digital clock glowed red in the darkness. Frank sat on the edge of the motel bed in his undershirt and boxers, staring at nothing. The radiator hissed its angry rhythm. Out on Route 34, trucks passed every few minutes, their engine noise rising and fading like mechanical breath. The TV was on, muted, cable news, talking heads, arguing about things Frank couldn't make himself care about. Blue light flickered across the ceiling. He'd tried to sleep, couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Travis drinking from his father's mug. Heard Linda's voice. This is how things are. The velvet box sat on the nightstand. Frank picked it up, opened it. The necklace caught the lamplight. Real diamonds. He'd made sure of that. White gold chain, delicate but strong, 3,800. 2 months of working in 118-degree heat, breathing air that felt like standing behind a jet engine. He'd bought it in Riyadh 6 months ago. The jeweler had assured him it was highest quality, sir. Your wife will love it. Frank had imagined her face. The surprise, the happiness, maybe even tears. Oh, Frank, you shouldn't have. She'd never see it, never wear it, probably wouldn't care if she did. He snapped the box shut, that small click again. The sound of something ending. What was it all for? Not just the necklace. The decade, the loneliness, the missed funerals and holidays and quiet evenings. The phone calls that never quite connected. The heat that made his skin crack and bleed. The nights lying awake in a shipping container converted to housing, listening to the desert wind and wondering if Linda was thinking about him. She hadn't been. She'd been thinking about Travis. Frank looked at his hands. 68 years old, liver spots, calluses from work. Still strong, but how much longer? How many fights did an old man have left in him? He could call her. His phone was right there on the nightstand, Linda's contacts still saved. He could call and say, "What? Please take me back? Can we work this out? I'm sorry for providing for you." He picked up the phone, thumb hovering over her name. He could go back on her terms, humiliated, diminished, but not alone. Maybe she'd let him stay in the house if he promised not to make trouble. Maybe they could pretend. A lot of marriages were pretend anyway, weren't they? Frank put the phone down. Not like this. He wouldn't beg, but the alternative. Die alone, in a motel room, in a town that had already decided he was the villain. He stood up, paced, 5 steps wall to wall in the tiny room, looked in the mirror above the dresser. An old man looked back. Not just calendar old, but defeated old, broken old. The kind of old that comes from losing something you can't get back. First time he'd looked truly old to himself. His father's voice in his memory, from the hospital bed, 1998. The cancer taking him. Don't let them take what's yours, son. Your name, your work, your dignity. Don't let them take it. Frank had thought his father meant the house, the tools, the physical things. Maybe he'd meant something else. There was an Ambien bottle on the bathroom counter, prescribed for the time zone changes, the overseas sleep schedule. Frank stared at it, not thinking about anything permanent, just not thinking at all for a while, not feeling, not being awake at 2 a.m. with his life in pieces. He could take 3, 4, sleep through tomorrow, maybe through the whole damn week. His hand was on the bottle when someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp raps, urgent. Frank froze. Who the hell at 3 a.m.? Travis coming to threaten him. Linda's lawyer with papers. He looked through the peephole. Doris Patterson stood there, holding a cardboard box. She looked stern, determined. Frank opened the door, chain still on. "Doris, it's 3 in the morning. I know what time it is. Let me in, now." Something in her voice. Frank unlatched the chain. Doris pushed past him, set the box on the bed. She looked at Frank, really looked at him. Standing there in his undershirt, the Ambien bottle visible on the bathroom counter, the TV flickering, the general wreckage of a man at his lowest. "Sit down," she said. "I'll make coffee." She used the room's tiny coffee maker, the kind that brews 1 cup at a time. Found the instant packets. The smell of cheap coffee filled the room, better than it had any right to be. They sat, Frank on the bed edge, Doris in the room's single chair. "Travis came by my house tonight," she said. "About 9 o'clock. Frank waited. "He told me to mind my own business, said you weren't my problem." Doris's jaw was tight. "Told me if I talked to you I'd regret it. Threatened me. A man 40 years younger than me, threatening a 72-year-old woman on her own porch." Doris, that's when I knew." She opened the box. "They're scared, Frank. They're scared because you're dangerous to them, which means you can win." The box was organized with tabs. Teacher habits. Doris pulled out the first section. Letters. A stack of them, maybe 100, maybe more, all in Frank's handwriting, all addressed to Linda, all unopened. "The post office returns them eventually," Doris said. "Return to sender. I collected them from your mailbox over the years, thought you might need them someday." Each envelope had a check visible through the window, uncashed, undeposited, ignored, evidence, proof. Frank had never abandoned anyone. Next came photographs. Doris had a good camera, a zoom lens. From her second-floor window, she documented everything. Travis moving belongings in, dated 18 months ago. Different cars in the driveway at odd hours. Travis loading Frank's tools into his truck, stealing them. "I kept a notebook, too." Doris showed him. Dates, times, events, meticulous. August 14th, Travis painted over Frank's name on mailbox. October 3rd, moving truck, removed workshop equipment. December 1st, Linda on phone, window open, heard her laughing. He'll never know. December 5th, Travis driving new Silverado, approximately $50,000. Everything documented, everything witnessed, everything real. I should have called you sooner, Doris said. Her voice cracked. Bill made me promise before he died. Watch out for Frank, and he said. I failed him for 3 years. But I'm not failing him anymore. Or you. Bill Patterson, Frank's fishing buddy. Dead 3 years now. Still looking out for him. From beyond. Frank's hands shook holding the notebook. There's more, Doris said. She pulled out legal documents, public records, power of attorney filing, domestic partnership registration. I found them in the county records. It's all there, Frank. Everything they did. And there's a lawyer I know, Amy Chen. She handles cases like this. Frank looked up. Cases like what? Elder exploitation, fraud, theft. Doris met his eyes. You have a case, Frank. A good one, but only if you fight. The room was silent except for the radiator and the distant highway. Frank thought about the Ambien bottle, about calling Linda, about running to Florida. Then he looked at the evidence. 10 years of letters Linda never opened. Photographs proving everything. A witness who'd risked a threat to tell the truth. They want me to disappear, Frank said quietly. They do, Doris nodded. Question is, will you? Outside, a truck passed. Its air horn echoed in the darkness. Frank picked up one of his own letters, saw his younger self's handwriting. Dear Linda, it's hot here, but I'm thinking of you. Sent the usual amount. Maybe we can take that trip to Yellowstone when I'm back. Love, Frank. Yellowstone. They'd never gone. He put the letter down, looked at Doris. No, he said, I won't. Wednesday morning, Frank knocked on Reverend Cole's office door at the church, 9 a.m. The Reverend's car was in the lot, but the church was empty. Quiet, the way churches are on weekdays, like they're resting. Cole opened the door. Looked like he hadn't slept much either. Frank, I didn't expect... We need to talk. About Linda. Cole's face did something complicated. I'm bound by pastoral confidentiality. Even when it protects lies. They sat in Cole's office, books on every wall, a wooden cross above the desk. Window, looking out on the cemetery where Frank's parents were buried. Frank leaned forward. Sam, you've been avoiding me since I got back. Every time you see me, you look guilty. You know something. Cole was quiet for a long time. His hands folded and unfolded on the desk. I married you too, he finally said. 30 years ago. Thought I knew you both. He paused. Linda came for marriage counseling, alone. Said you'd stopped communicating, stopped sending money. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But the sessions felt wrong. She wasn't grieving. She was relieved. Happy even. Cole pulled his reading glasses off, rubbed his eyes. 6 months ago, she said something that troubled me. I record my sessions, with consent, for note-taking purposes. He unlocked his desk drawer, pulled out a memory card. If I share this, I violate a sacred trust. If you don't, Frank said, you protect evil. Which one matters more? Cole plugged the card into his laptop, found the file. His finger hovered over the play button. God forgive me, he said, and pressed it. Linda's voice filled the office. Clear, unmistakable. The fool's still sending money every month. Thinks I'm saving it for our future. There is no our future. There hasn't been for years. Travis's voice. What if he comes back? Linda laughing. It's my house now. The POA makes that clear. And if he makes trouble, everyone in town already knows he abandoned me. Who are they going to believe? The recording stopped. The office was silent. Frank sat there, hearing his wife's contempt in her own voice. The fool. Still sending money. No future. There's more, Cole said quietly. Hours of it. Her talking about you like you were already dead. Like you were an obstacle to get around, not a person. Frank's hands were shaking. Why now? Why are you telling me this now? Because I was a coward. Cole's voice broke. I wanted it to work itself out, wanted to avoid taking sides. But Doris called me yesterday, told me about the evidence, about Travis threatening her. He looked Frank in the eye. My silence was complicity. I can't live with that anymore. This will cost you. I know. Half the congregation will never forgive me. Maybe I'll lose my position. Cole made a copy of the memory card, handed it to Frank. But I'll sleep at night, finally. That afternoon, a knock on Frank's motel door. Professional, businesslike. A young woman stood there. Asian, mid-30s, sharp eyes behind designer glasses. Business suit. Carried herself like someone used to winning. Mr. Henderson, I'm Amy Chen. Reverend Cole called me. Frank let her in. Amy set her briefcase on the table, all business. I specialize in elder exploitation cases. I take some pro bono when they're righteous. She looked at him. My grandfather lost his restaurant the same way. Family member filed a POA, drained the assets. By the time we figured it out, he was dead. I was in law school. Couldn't help him then. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be ready to fight. She pulled out a legal pad. Tell me everything. Frank showed her Doris's evidence. The unopened letters, the photographs, the notebook timeline, Cole's audio recordings, the bank statements. Amy worked through it all methodically, making notes, cross-referencing dates. Her pen moved fast across the paper. Timeline, she said. When did you send money? Show me the wire confirmations. Frank pulled out his phone. Bank app. Monthly transfers going back 10 years. Never missed one. Amy stopped on March. Wait, you sent money March 12th this year? Yes. $2,000. Same as always. She pulled out the power of attorney document. Read it. Read it again. Her eyes went sharp. This POA is dated March 15th. So? So this document claims you were unreachable and hadn't provided financial support for 6 months. That's the legal justification for Linda filing without you. Amy tapped the paper. But you sent money 3 days before this was filed, with electronic confirmation, with a paper trail. Frank leaned forward. What does that mean? It means they backdated this document and screwed up the dates. Amy's smile was fierce. This isn't just unethical, Mr. Henderson. It's fraud. Provable, documented fraud. Can we win? We can. Amy pulled out her phone, started making notes. Emergency motion to invalidate the POA. Challenge the refinance as fraudulent. Demand full accounting. We'll file tomorrow. What will this cost? For you? Nothing. This is exactly the kind of case I came back home to fight. She looked up from her notes. The judge will be Martin Reeves, Korean War vet, hates fraud, hates people who exploit the system. She pointed at Frank. You got a DD-214? Yes. Bring it. He'll notice. He'll respect it. For the first time in a week, Frank felt something other than despair. Hope. Fragile, but real. They'll fight back, Amy warned. Linda's lawyer will attack your character. Why'd you stay overseas if you cared? Why didn't you visit? Be ready for that. I stayed because I was providing. That's how I was raised. My father worked 70-hour weeks. Sacrifice meant love. Say exactly that in court. Juries understand sacrifice. Amy closed her briefcase. Hearings in 1 week, fast-tracked because of the fraud evidence. She stood to leave, paused at the door. Mr. Henderson, can I ask you something? Frank. Frank, why'd you come back? After 10 years, you could have stayed overseas, started over somewhere else. When Frank thought about it, this is my home. My father's tools are in that garage. My mother's dishes are in that kitchen. 40 years of my life are in that house. He paused. They don't get to erase me like I never existed. Amy nodded. Good, because that's what we're fighting for. Not the house. Your existence, your dignity. After she left, Frank sat in the quiet room. The evidence was spread across the bed, the letters, the photos, the recordings, the fraudulent POA with its impossible dates. For the first time since he'd come home, Frank wasn't alone. Doris had watched and waited. Cole had broken his silence. Amy had taken up the sword. And Frank? Frank was done being a ghost. Friday morning, 3 days before the hearing, Frank laid his suit out on the motel bed, navy blue. 30 years old, maybe more, still fit. He'd kept himself in shape even overseas. The fabric was good quality, the kind that lasts if you take care of it. He brushed off the dust, checked for stains. None. His father had taught him, take care of your things, they'll take care of you. The shoes were Florsheims, black leather, resoled twice but still solid. He polished them at the motel sink, using the little shoe shine kit he'd carried for decades. His father again, judge a man by his shoes, keep them shined. In the mirror, Frank practiced his testimony. I went overseas to provide for my wife's future. Too stiff, sounded rehearsed. He tried again. I thought sacrifice meant love. I was wrong about how she'd see it, but I meant well. Better. Honest. Plain. Amy had called that morning with final instructions. Answer only what's asked. Don't over-explain. If their lawyer tries to rattle you, pause, breathe, respond calmly. The judge is watching your character, not just your words. What if I freeze up? Look at me. I'll be right there. You're not alone. Frank pulled his DD-214 from its manila envelope. Honorable discharge. United States Navy, 1975-1979. Logistics. The paper was yellowed, but the words were still clear. His father's voice. That paper proves you served. Nobody can take that. He folded it carefully. Put it in his jacket's inside pocket. Not to show off. Just to have it close. Across town, in Robert Gaines's law office, Linda and Travis sat in leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Gaines reviewed documents at his mahogany desk. 50-something, silver-haired, expensive suit. The kind of lawyer who won by looking like he'd already won. Consistency is key, he said. Linda, you're the victim, 10 years alone. What choice did you have? Linda nodded. She dressed carefully for this meeting. Conservative, sympathetic, the abandoned wife costume. Travis, you were helping family. That's not a crime. You stepped up when Frank stepped out. Travis shifted in his chair. He hadn't been sleeping well. Kept thinking about that courthouse, about Judge Reeves's military background, about all those unopened letters Frank had sent. What about the evidence they have? Travis asked. Gaines waved a dismissive hand. Letters, photos, circumstantial. The POA is legal and notarized. That's what matters. There's audio recordings, Linda said, from pastoral counseling. Pastor penitent privilege, inadmissible. Gaines sounded confident, too confident. And if they bring up the date discrepancy... What date discrepancy? Travis glanced at Linda. The POA is dated March 15th. Frank sent money March 12th. They might notice. Gaines paused, frowned. We'll argue the dates are approximate. Legal filings aren't exact sciences. But his voice had changed, less certain. What if we lose? Linda asked. We won't. I've won cases with far less. Gaines showed them a photo of Judge Reeves. Military background. We'll emphasize Frank's absence during his service years. Make it about loyalty. Travis stared at the judge's photo. Something in those eyes. The set of that jaw. This was a man who'd seen real sacrifice. Real service. I think we're in trouble, Travis said quietly. Linda shot him a look. Don't say that. But Travis couldn't shake the feeling. Frank had been a ghost for 10 years. Easy to dismiss, easy to spend his money, easy to mock. But ghosts had a way of becoming real when you least wanted them to. Sunday night, eve of the courthouse hearing. Frank sat by the motel window at 10 p.m. Couldn't sleep, but not the same panicked insomnia as before. This was different. Anticipation, readiness. He made coffee, watched the occasional car pass on Route 34. The stars were out. December sky, clear and cold. He thought about Linda, about Travis, about the decade he'd lost. Strange thing was, he didn't think about Linda romantically anymore. That grief had processed into something else, acceptance maybe. He'd loved someone who didn't exist, or had stopped existing. That was sad, but it wasn't his fault. A knock on the door, Doris holding a thermos. Thought you might need real coffee, she said. Not that instant garbage. They sat together, didn't talk much, didn't need to. After a while, Doris stood to leave. Bill would be proud of you, she said. I'm doing this for him too, and for all the men who built things, honestly. Who did the work and expected nothing but to be treated fair. Doris squeezed his shoulder. Get some sleep, big day tomorrow. After she left, Frank finished his coffee, looked at his suit hanging ready on the door, his shined shoes lined up beneath it, his DD 214 in the jacket pocket. He lay down, closed his eyes. And for the first time since coming home, sleep came easy. He didn't dream about Linda, didn't dream about Travis or the house or the money. He dreamed about his father's workshop, the smell of sawdust, his dad teaching him to measure twice, cut once, the weight of a good hammer in young hands, the satisfaction of building something that would last. When Frank woke at 6 a.m., he felt rested. Not because he knew he'd win, but because he'd already won something more important than a house or money or even justice. He'd won himself back. He dressed carefully. The suit fit well. The shoes gleamed. He pinned the DD 214 inside his jacket, not where anyone could see it, but where he could feel it against his chest. A reminder. A talisman. At 7:30, Doris's car horn sounded outside. Frank took one last look around the motel room. This might be the last night he spent here. One way or another, things would be different after today. He grabbed his coat and walked out into the December morning. The sun was rising, pale and cold. The air smelled like snow coming. Frank Henderson was going to court. The snow squeaked underfoot, that same sound from the morning Frank came home, the morning his key didn't work. Full circle. County Courthouse, 9 a.m. Stone steps, iron railings, the flag snapping in the wind. Frank climbed slowly, Amy beside him. Behind them, Doris and Reverend Cole, his team, his witnesses, his proof that he wasn't alone. Across the plaza, Linda and Travis arrived with Robert Gaines. Linda in a conservative dress, playing the part. Travis in an ill-fitting suit, borrowed probably. Tugging at the collar, their eyes didn't meet Frank's. Couldn't. Inside, the courthouse smelled like floor wax and old paper, and 100 years of justice attempted. High ceilings, wood paneling, the American flag and the state flag flanking the bench. The gallery was half full, small town. People were curious. Judge Martin Reeves entered. Everyone stood. He was exactly as his photo suggested. Ramrod straight, reading glasses, military bearing, 70 years old, but looked like he could still do 50 push-ups without breaking a sweat. Be seated. Amy stood. Your Honor, Amy Chen for Plaintiff Frank Henderson. Gaines stood. Robert Gaines, for defendants, Linda Henderson and Travis Henderson. Reeves looked over his glasses at both of them. Let's proceed. Ms. Chen, opening statement. Amy's opening was surgical, precise. Frank Henderson spent 10 years overseas providing for his wife's retirement. He sent money every month, wrote letters every week. His wife never opened the letters, never cashed the checks. Instead, she and his nephew systematically drained his accounts and stole his home equity. This is elder exploitation. This is fraud. This is theft. Gaines's opening was emotional, designed for sympathy. Linda Henderson was abandoned for 10 years, a husband who chose money over marriage. Travis Henderson stepped up when family needed him. This isn't theft, it's survival. It's family taking care of family when Frank Henderson walked away. Reeves's face was unreadable. Ms. Chen, call your first witness. The plaintiff calls Doris Patterson. Doris walked to the stand, sworn in, sat straight, hands folded, every inch the retired school teacher. Amy walked her through it, the timeline, the photographs from her window, the notebook with dates and times and events, Travis painting over Frank's name on the mailbox, the moving truck taking Frank's tools, Linda laughing on the phone, loud enough to hear through an open window. He'll never know. Gaines tried on cross-examination. Isn't this just a busybody neighbor spying? Doris looked at him like he was a student who hadn't done his homework. I prefer concerned citizen documenting a crime. A few people in the gallery laughed. Reeves rapped his gavel, but there was the ghost of a smile on his face. Reverend Cole, Amy called next. Cole took the stand, looked 10 years older than he had a week ago, the cost of breaking silence. He explained the counseling sessions, Linda's claims that Frank had abandoned her, how Cole had believed her at first, because why wouldn't a pastor believe a suffering wife? But you record your sessions with consent for note-taking. And these recordings contradict Mrs. Henderson's public statements? Completely. Amy played the audio. Linda's voice filled the courtroom. The fool's still sending money every month. Thinks I'm saving it for our future. There is no our future. The gallery reacted. Gasps. Whispers. Linda's face went pale. Travis stared at his hands. Mr. Henderson, Amy called. Frank walked to the stand, sat down, looked at the room, at the judge, at Linda, who wouldn't meet his eyes. Amy's questions were simple, direct. Why did you take the overseas contract? To provide for retirement. Did you communicate with your wife? Every month. Letters, calls, money, always. What did you expect when you came home? Just my wife, my house, quiet. His voice cracked on the last part. Just barely, but enough. Gaines stood for cross-examination. Henderson, 10 years is a long time to be away from a marriage. Yes, sir, it is. Some might say you chose money over your wife. Some might. I chose security. I thought that was love. My father worked 70-hour weeks to provide for us. That's what men did, show love through sacrifice. But you could have visited. Flights were $2,000 round trip. If I spent that, I couldn't send the support money. I chose her security over my comfort. Frank paused. If she'd asked me to come home, I would have. She never asked. Gaines called Travis next. Tried to establish the helpful nephew narrative. But Travis was sweating, stammering, kept touching his collar. Amy destroyed him on cross-examination. What's your employment status, Mr. Henderson? I'm between opportunities. You've been between opportunities for 3 years. Using whose money? Travis couldn't answer. Amy showed the receipts, the business that failed, the truck, the Rolex, all bought after the refinance. What were you doing while Frank Henderson worked 14-hour days in 118-degree heat? Travis had no answer. Then Amy pulled out the power of attorney, showed it to the judge. Your Honor, this document is dated March 15th. It claims Frank Henderson was unreachable and hadn't provided financial support for 6 months. She handed Reeves the bank records. Frank sent $2,000 on March 12th. 3 days before this POA was filed. Electronic confirmation, paper trail, irrefutable. The courtroom went silent. Gaines stood. Your Honor, dates and legal documents can be approximate? Reeves removed his glasses. Dangerous sign. Counselor, are you suggesting that notarized legal documents contain approximations? No, Your Honor. But that's enough. Reeves looked at Travis. Young man, stand up. Travis stood, shaking. I've reviewed your employment history. You're 38 years old, part-time jobs, failed businesses. Reeves gestured at Frank. This man worked in 110-degree heat for 10 years, sent money home every month. What were you doing? I was helping. You weren't helping. You were exploiting. Reeves's voice was ice. You saw an opportunity and you took it. That's not family. That's parasitism. He turned to Linda. Mrs. Henderson, you filed for domestic partnership while still married? Your Honor, I was lonely. Loneliness doesn't excuse fraud or theft or cruelty. Silence. I find the power of attorney invalid due to fraudulent representations. The house refinance is void. Property reverts to Frank Henderson immediately. Linda and Travis Henderson will repay $145,000 plus interest, total $178,000, wage garnishment over 10 years. Defendants have 30 days to vacate. Restraining order, no contact with the plaintiff. The gavel came down. That crack echoed like a branch breaking. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Linda tried to speak. Frank held up one hand. Don't. He walked away, didn't look back. Behind him, Linda stood alone on the steps. Travis sat on the curb, head in his hands. Amy walked beside Frank to the parking lot. You won. Frank stopped, looked back at the courthouse, at Linda, small and alone on those stone steps. Did I? He said quietly. 30 days later, January. Frank stood in front of his house with the new keys in his hand. The locksmith had come that morning, changed everything. These keys were his, only his. He unlocked the door. It opened smooth, no resistance. The house was empty. Linda and Travis had taken the furniture. Not what they needed, what they could hurt him with. The couch was gone. The dining table, the bed, even the living room curtains. Frank's footsteps echoed on the bare floors. In the living room, there was a rectangle of clean hardwood where the couch had been, surrounded by years of sun-faded wood, ghost furniture, shadow rooms. The kitchen cabinets were mostly empty. They'd taken the dishes, the pots, the silverware. But in the back of one cabinet, forgotten or deemed worthless, was his navy mug, the one with the anchor, his father's mug. Frank made coffee in it, the first coffee in his own kitchen in a decade. It didn't taste like victory, just tasted like coffee. He carried it through the empty rooms. Master bedroom, bare mattress on the floor, frame gone. Guest room, completely empty. Bathroom, they'd even taken the shower curtain. In the hallway, his and Linda's wedding photo still hung on the wall. Black and white. 1982, courthouse steps. Both of them so young, so hopeful. Frank took it down, stood there holding it, looking at those two kids who thought they had it all figured out. He didn't smash it, didn't tear it, just carried it to the closet and set it inside, frame and all. Not thrown away, not displayed, just retired. Some chapters close, that's all. The garage still had his father's tools. They hadn't dared touch those. The toolbox with his dad's initials burned into the wood. The hand plane that had belonged to his grandfather. The level that was older than Frank. Continuity. Legacy. Things that lasted. He was halfway through his coffee when the doorbell rang. Doris stood on the porch with a casserole dish covered in foil. Thought you could use a real meal, she said. Frank let her in. She looked at the empty living room, didn't comment. Just headed to the kitchen, set the dish down. I'm having belated Christmas dinner tonight, she said. You're coming. Doris, I don't want to impose. Bill would want you there. I want you there. She looked at him. You're not spending your first night back in an empty house eating takeout. 7 o'clock. Don't argue. Doris's home smelled like ham and yeast rolls and apple pie. Christmas lights still up, tree still in the corner. She'd waited, Frank realized. Waited for him to come home before celebrating. It wasn't just Doris. Reverend Cole was there. Amy Chen. Old Mr. Peterson, with his cane and his ramrod posture. Wanda from the diner. An unlikely family, thrown together by crisis. Cole said grace, asked Frank to lead it. Frank cleared his throat. I'm grateful for friends who saw the truth and fought for it. For people who stood up when it was easier to look away. For, his voice caught, for not being alone. Amen, Doris said softly. They ate. The conversation flowed easy, not about the trial, about life. Amy told stories about her grandfather, the restaurant he'd built from nothing, the recipes he'd guarded like state secrets. Mr. Peterson talked about Korea, the brothers he'd served with. After dinner, Cole pulled Frank aside. I have a favor to ask, and he said. The young men's group at church, they need a mentor, someone who's been through the fire and came out standing. I'm not exactly a success story, Sam. You fought for your dignity when it would have been easier to run. You stood up when you could have stayed down. Cole met his eyes. That's the definition of success. That's what these boys need to see. Frank thought about it, teaching the next generation, passing something on. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. On the way out, Betty Summers stopped him. Betty, who'd whispered in the church, who'd judged him without asking. Frank, she looked uncomfortable. I owe you an apology. I believe the wrong person. I'm sorry. Frank could have been cold, could have held the grudge. Instead, he nodded. We all make mistakes, Betty. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. but not rejection either. In his truck, his phone buzzed. Text from Amy. My grandfather wants to meet you. Dinner next week? He says you're brothers in arms. Different war, same battle. Frank smiled. Actually smiled. First real one in weeks. I'd be honored, he texted back. Saturday morning. Frank woke in the empty house, sunlight coming through bare windows. The bedroom was cold. They'd turned the heat down to spite him, probably, but the radiator was warming up. He made coffee in the Navy mug, looked at his to-do list. First item, fix the porch step. It had been broken for a decade. Creaked and wobbled every time someone stepped on it. He'd meant to fix it before he went overseas, never had. It was still broken when he came home. Still broken now. Time to change that. He carried his toolbox out front, his father's tools. The hammer with the worn wooden handle, the level that still worked, perfect. The handsaw with teeth that needed sharpening but would do the job. The January sun was weak but warming. The daffodil bulbs Linda had planted years ago were starting to push through the frozen ground. Life coming back. Frank pried up the old board. It crumbled in places, rotted through. He measured the gap. Cut a new board from the lumber in his garage, his father's lumber, saved for projects that mattered. He was fitting the board when a kid on a bike stopped at the curb. 10, maybe 11, watching. Need something? Frank called. The kid hesitated. Need help, mister? Frank paused. He could say no. Could work alone. That was his habit. You know how to use a hammer? My dad showed me. Before he moved out, single-parent home, kid needed a male figure. Needed someone to show him that men could be steady, could be there. Come on then. May you. The kid, Jason, he said his name was, dropped his bike and came up to the porch. Frank handed him the hammer. Tested the weight in the boy's hand. Hold it like this, nail straight, don't bend it, slow and steady beats, fast and sloppy. Jason tried, bent the first nail, got frustrated. That's okay. I bent 1,000 before I got it right. Try again. Together they nailed the new board into place. Frank guided, Jason worked. The kid was learning, focusing, taking pride in getting it right. You live here alone? Jason asked. Yeah. Don't you get lonely? Frank thought about it. About Linda, about the empty rooms, about Doris and Cole, and Amy and this kid with the hammer. Alone's not the same as lonely, Frank said. Lonely is when you're with people who don't see you. Alone is when you know who you are without them. Jason didn't fully understand, but he felt the truth in it. The new board settled into place. Solid, no creak, no wobble. Frank tested it with his weight. Perfect. Jason grinned. We did good. We did. A crow cawed from the oak tree in the front yard. Winter bird. Survivor. Frank looked at his house. Not the same house he'd left. Not the same man returning to it, but both still standing. Both still here. What are you fixing next week? Jason asked. Deck needs sanding. You free Saturday? I'll be here. The kid rode off, pedaling hard, full of energy and life and forward motion. Frank packed up the tools. Looked at the new porch step. Solid work. Work that would last. He went inside. The house was still empty. Still echoed, but it felt different now. Not haunted, just waiting. Waiting for him to fill it with whatever came next. The velvet box with the necklace was in his sock drawer. Not thrown away, not worn, just there. Some investments didn't pay off. That didn't mean the investor was worthless. That night, Frank sat on the porch. The new step was solid beneath him. Stars were out, sharp and clear in the January cold. He thought about Linda, about Travis, about the decade he'd lost. He could be bitter, could spend the rest of his life angry about what was stolen. Or he could choose something else. Tomorrow, he'd go to church. He'd talk to Cole about mentoring those young men. He'd have dinner with Amy's grandfather, swap stories about survival and dignity and refusing to be erased. He'd teach Jason how to sand a deck properly, how to measure twice and cut once, how to build things that lasted. He'd live, not the life he'd planned, but a life he was choosing. Frank finished his coffee, rinsed the Navy mug, set it in the dish rack to dry. Tomorrow, there was work to do. There was always work to do. But tonight, for the first time since coming home, Frank Henderson was at peace. Spring came the way it always does in the Midwest. Not all at once, but in pieces. A warm day here, a cold snap there. The daffodils Linda had planted years ago bloomed anyway, yellow against the brown grass. They didn't care about divorce or betrayal or who owned the house. They just bloomed. Frank sat on his porch on a Sunday morning in April, coffee steaming in the Navy mug. The church bells were ringing in the distance. 10 minutes to service. He'd go. He always went. But not yet. Not quite yet. 3 months since the courthouse. 3 months since Linda and Travis had moved out. The house was still mostly empty. Frank had bought a bed, a kitchen table, 2 chairs. Enough. More than enough, really. Linda and Travis were paying back the money. Slowly. Wage garnishment meant at $487 a month, which would take them 15 years at that rate, but it was recorded. Official, justice on paper, even if it was cold comfort. Frank didn't hate them anymore, didn't think about them much at all, if he was honest. Indifference, he'd learned, was more final than anger. Anger meant they still mattered. Indifference meant they were just people he used to know. Doris waved from her porch next door. Sunday ritual now. They'd have lunch after church, probably. She'd made a roast. Frank would bring the rolls from the bakery on Main Street. Jason pedaled past on his bike, headed to his mom's house down the street. The kid waved. Still on for the deck, Mr. Henderson? 9 a.m. sharp. Bring gloves. Jason grinned and rode on. The young men's group at church was going well. 6 boys, ages 14 to 17. Frank taught them practical things, how to change oil, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to balance a checkbook. But mostly he taught them that being a man wasn't about being the loudest or the richest or the strongest. It was about showing up, about doing what you said you'd do, about standing up when it would be easier to stay down. Frank sipped his coffee. It was good coffee. Better than the instant stuff from the motel, better than the burnt diner coffee, better even than what he'd had overseas. He'd learned something in all of this. Learned it the hard way, the way most important lessons come. Silence didn't mean surrender. His generation had been taught to endure, to provide, to sacrifice, without complaint. Those weren't bad things, but they weren't enough. Not by themselves. Presence mattered. Being there mattered. Asking what do you need mattered more than assuming you knew. He'd built his marriage on sacrifice. It had collapsed anyway. Now he was building something else. A life on connection, on showing up, on being seen and seeing others, not happily ever after. That was fairy tale stuff. But honorably here and now, that was real. That was enough. The church bells rang again. 5 minutes. Frank finished his coffee, rinsed the mug, hand-washed it the way his father had taught him, set it in the dish rack to dry. He looked at the door, his key, his home. Not the life he'd planned when he was young, not the retirement he'd worked for, but a life he was choosing to live, one honest day at a time. Frank Henderson locked his door and walked to church. The daffodils bloomed, the sun warmed, the bells called. And in that small town in the heartland, an old man who'd fought for his dignity and won it back, not in a courthouse, but in his own heart, walked forward into whatever came next. Not bitter, not broken, just standing, just there, just enough. If you've got people in your life who sacrificed for you, who worked the long hours, who made the hard choices, who loved you the only way they knew how, maybe tell them, maybe ask them what they need, maybe show up while there's still time. Dignity isn't given, it's chosen every single day, and that's enough. That's always been enough.